October 31st, 1998 was a Saturday. Your humble mutant host was 11 years old. After a night of trick-or-treating, I sat cross-legged on the living room rug, scarfing candy and channel surfing, looking for something scary. And out of the analog haze of the screen, between static and infomercials, rode a cowboy-hatted stranger from the South. And he showed me the future by way of the past. This was the night I met Joe Bob Briggs.
Hey, Joe Bob Briggs here with the #1 rule for a TNT Monster Vision movie. Anybody can die at any moment.
TNT, Monster Vision, the first ever Joe Bob Briggs Dusk to Dawn Friday the 13th marathon. During that all-nighter, Joe Bob screened Friday the 13th's Part 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. The Friday franchise is the king daddy of slasher franchises. It has peers, many of them, but the Fridays are the quintessential slasher movies, embodying everything the Midnight Mind conjures when the term slasher is evoked. Interesting, considering in its inception, the original Friday the 13th was simply a quick cash grab ripoff of John Carpenter's Halloween. Now, 1978's Halloween is a cinematic mic drop, and one of the greatest pieces of cinema ever created. Not horror cinema, not American cinema. Cinema. No hyperbole. And yet, when it came time to take the original masterpiece and turn it into a franchise, it paled in comparison to the Friday and Nightmare on Elm Street franchises in both commercial return and cinematic ambition. Why? Well, even though the Halloween franchise would eventually become the most commercially successful slasher series of all time, and even though I adore its many sequels, reboots, remakes, and retreads, it is, by far, the most reactive film franchise in history, tying itself into knots to fit in with the horror trends of the day. After replicating the heyday slashers, it replicated Scream. Then it oddly replicated both the found footage and maybe the kung fu craze of the early aughts, and after that the remake craze of the late aughts, and then finally the legacy sequel craze of the mid to late 2010s. Hell, Halloween 6 almost watches as a sad replication of the floundering slasher entries of the early 90s. New Nightmare and Jason Goes to Hell don't land? Well, we'll make a Halloween movie that doesn't land too. And through all these entries, the series frets endlessly over its own continuity, pivoting and backpedaling character histories and plot revelations, retconning itself again and again and again. Imagine it as a dude you might meet at a party. He's cute and smart, but he's too insecure to be really attractive, too desperate, too safe, too inauthentic. But why is he this way when he's a great guy deep down? Well, it doesn't help that the few occasions that he really put himself out there and tried to be his own man, he was resoundingly rejected. Any time the Halloween franchise has tried to find a voice of its own and not be another run-of-the-mill slasher, audiences have balked, resulting in vitriolic fan reaction and poor financial returns. But the Friday the 13th franchise? It does not give a shit about continuity. It doesn't care about making sense. It doesn't care about making a statement. It just wants to make some quick cash by giving horror fans 90 minutes of gory glory again and again and again. It goes big when it wants to, and it's allowed to, because it is completely unencumbered by self-doubt or pretense. If Halloween is a loser brooding in the corner, then the Friday the 13th franchise is a dumb-as-rocks frat boy breezing through life, failing upward, completely oblivious to his own faults, and enjoying every single second of his vapid himbo life. And you know, you're not going home with either one of them, but Halloween does chime in with some well-needed wit from now and then. And Friday is fun to watch make a fool of himself. In honor of that fateful meeting with Mr. Briggs all those years ago, and since there's a Friday the 13th in October this year, tonight it's a slasher franchise Hall of Fame double. We kick off the night with the only movie in the Halloween franchise that isn't a slasher, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. A long time ago, in a Hollywood boardroom far, far away, after the release of the first Halloween 2, not to be confused with these Halloween 2s. It was decided that the Halloween franchise needed to be an anthology series set around Halloween. So gone was Michael Myers in Haddonfield and the entire deranged killer stalks babysitter's designing principle. In its place is a film about rituals, witchcraft, and one really catchy TV commercial. This is the strongest pivot a horror franchise has ever made. It did some very new stuff with Halloween that we hadn't seen before. So of course fans hated it. But in the 40 years since its release, it not only grew a cult following, but it is genuinely beloved by a majority of the Halloween fandom, second only to the original Carpenter film on many best-of lists. On that Halloween night long ago in 1998, I'm ashamed to say my 11-year-old mutant brain couldn't stay conscious for the duration of Joe Bob Briggs' marathon. Entranced as I was, I fell asleep halfway through Friday the 13th, Part 5. And in doing so, I missed Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. We right that wrong tonight by making it our second feature. Friday 6 is pure slasher euphoria. It's the movie that made Jason a universal monster and added a wicked edge of humor that would later influence the likes of Scream. It has legit scares, legit laughs, great actors playing great characters, great kills despite the MPAA nixing much of the fun, a bitchin' soundtrack, the best opening scene of the whole franchise, maybe the best slasher opening of the 80s period, and a bomb-ass finale where Tommy Jarvis, played by horror royalty Tom Matthews, has a final battle with Jason on a boat in the middle of Crystal Lake in a ring of fire. It rules. Our holy mother of celluloid awaits, my fellow mutants. Just as she waits behind the shrubs on our walk home, just as she waits at the bottom of Crystal Lake. She calls us home now. This one's for Joe Bob. The drive-in will never die.
So which slasher franchise do you go home with?
Oh, I think you know the answer to that question. Maniac Cop, right?
Huh?
The Maniac Cop franchise. He shows up to break up the frat party, and she realizes it's the best franchise of all, right?
Yeah, totally.